I am Miss Coco. I'm from the Palm Bay Public Library, part of the Brevard County Public Library system. So welcome to Care of Magical Creatures. Tonight we are going to be working with Frankenworms. So you're going to need your worms. Make sure they're the sour kind. And for all you muggles out there, I will tell you exactly what the ingredients are so you can follow along as well. So we have our Frankenworms. For you guys, you muggles out there, non-wizarding folk, they are sour gummy worms. We're also going to be using gillyweed water. This is vinegar. And we're going to also be using some pre-treated Frankenworms. This concoction consists of our Frankenworms, our gillyweed water, and also our wartcap powder, which is baking soda. So baking soda, vinegar, and sour gummy worms. And these worms have been sitting in this mixture for about 15 minutes. So I'm trying to eat away at that sour coating. But because they've been soaked in it, it mixes and binds with the baking soda, our wartcap powder. So for your wartcap powder, you only need a generous dose, just a few spoonfuls mixed into some regular water, enough that it looks kind of cloudy where you can't see your worms. So now I am going to experiment. So for our Frankenworms, we want to make them dance. We want to make them rise back up. So I have my clear glasses. I'm going to take my gillyweed water. I'm going to pour some of it into each of my glasses. You want about just enough to where you'll be able to see your worms. And now I'm going to take my pre-treated Frankenworms. So I'm pulling them out of my container. This is the part where you might have to get your hands a little bit dirty. So I'm going to reach in and pull out a worm. If it doesn't try and slither away from me first. So here is my pre-treated worm. So I'm going to stick it into my vinegar. And we're going to wait a couple of minutes because at first it might not seem like it's actually having a reaction. But baking soda and vinegar do have a reaction. If you've ever made a volcano, you know it. And it could be that my worms need to sit a little bit longer. So I'm going to keep the rest of them in their jar, and I'm going to take some fresh Frankenworms, my sour gummy worms, and I'm going to pull one out. These have not been soaked. I'm going to drop it into the other vat of vinegar or gillyweed water. So we're going to give that a couple of minutes to kind of react in our solutions. I'm going to push these a little closer so you can see when they start to dance. If they start to dance, hopefully our magic will work correctly this time. So now, what actually causes the reactions? So the worms are supposed to move because of a chemical reaction between the baking soda and the vinegar. So our sodium bicarbonate and our weak acetic acid, which is our vinegar. So by combining these, they fizzle, sometimes they foam. And in the case of our worms, they're supposed to make our worms kind of dance. So right now I'm not seeing either of them dance, but it could just mean that I didn't soak my worms long enough. So while they're sitting in their solution, give it a little bit of a stir, I'm going to continue on. So this is the same reaction that causes baking soda and vinegar in volcanoes, right? We talked about that. Now, eventually, the tiny little gas bubbles that we see starting on our worm will rise and they'll start to burst. And when they start to burst and rise, that's what makes our worm kind of look like it's dancing a bit. It might look like it's jumping. So one of the tricks to this is cutting your worms. You can try leaving them whole and soaking them. You might need to soak them a little bit longer. But if you take your worm and you cut it straight down lengthwise and you make them thinner, almost like spaghetti, they soak up more of the baking soda solution. That way, when they go into the vinegar, you might get a faster reaction. So let's see. I see my worms sitting there. I'm gonna give these guys a stir. Make sure they don't sit and stick to the bottom. Gonna just gently move him a little. And I don't see him dancing, and I don't see my other worm dancing. But let's see if I drop a new worm in. Gotta find one. Let's give that a minute. I see the bubbles instantly starting. Can you guys see that? Let me turn this around. So there's our second worm. It's starting to fizzle a bit. I can see the bubbles are rising. They're coating my worm. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take more of my gillyweed water, my vinegar, and just dump a little bit more into my cup. I'm going to set this back down. And it looks like he's starting to wiggle a bit. But it could just be that he needs longer to soak with our baking soda so that there's enough on him and through the gummy that when it reaches the vinegar, it dances. So I'm gonna give that another minute. I'm going to stir up my other gummy worms. I'm making sure that there's enough baking soda or wartcap powder in there that they'll get coated with it. So I see the bubbles. I'm gonna add another worm, if I can find one. So we have one worm up and fizzing. You can see all the bubbles on my gummy worms, my Frankenworms. So this is the kind of reaction we want. And as more bubbles start to arise and burst, it's gonna make the water, the vinegar actually, fizz so that they look as though they're dancing. So I have one worm back from the gummy beyond. So with my first experiment not quite going to plan, I left some gummy worms in my baking soda and water solution to sit for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And then in my clear glass here, I have more vinegar. I want to see if I can get these worms to dance like they're supposed to, be Frankenworms. So the general directions are to let them sit for about 15 minutes to a half an hour. As I said, I let these guys sit for way longer than that, just so they could soak up that baking soda. And let's see what happens. So here's one. Now generally they say to let it sit for a couple minutes. Up, there he goes. So I've got one worm doing his little wiggle waggle. Let's see if I can get another. There goes a second worm. Now because I've left my worms in for so long, they are starting to get a little too squishy. So they are starting to fall apart. I would say about half an hour is really the best. Maybe max an hour. So I've got one worm kind of doing what it's supposed to. Standing up, it's kind of wiggle waggling as those bubbles burst. I'm gonna see how many I can get in there to make this look like Frankenworms. And there I added just a little bit of baking soda, just for fun. It even looks like it's smoking. It's fizzing, misting. And you can try this with a variety of different sour gummy creatures. There's octopuses, there's sharks, there's fish, there's bigger worms than this. There's even sour gummy bears you could give a try. So I hope you all had fun. I hope you got your Frankenworms back from the great gummy beyond.